I'm Julie Mason, and so pleased to welcome back Pete Buttigieg. He is the 19th Secretary of Transportation. He tweets at Secretary Pete. Good morning, Mr. Secretary.
Good morning. Nice to be with you.
It's great to have you. So, can you give us an update on the hard infrastructure bill? Are those are some projects getting funded already?
Dollars are moving. So we got to work right away as soon as the president signed the bill in November. It creates about 40 new programs that my department's administering, as well as adding more dollars to longstanding programs like the formula dollars for highways and that gets so much of what we need out to communities, to states to be able to improve roads. We just announced a few weeks ago the beginning of the Bridge Formula program that is sending every state and territory dollars that they can use to fix and improve bridges, something that unfortunately we were reminded again in Pittsburgh just how urgently it's needed around the country. And we'll continue to be making announcements just about every week about new and improved programs that we're standing up and, again, getting those dollars out to the communities to improve everything from roads and bridges to trains and transit to ports and airports.
You know, so much of the discussion before that bill was passed was about the bleak history of infrastructure, especially in cities, and how it divided black neighborhoods and just it just did terrible things. And I wonder, how is that being addressed on the back end? Like, how are those kinds of concerns being addressed in the implementation of this bill?
Well, the important thing is to get it right this time, to do better, and even to improve in areas that were damaged in the past. Look, the whole point of transportation, the whole point of infrastructure is to connect, but sometimes in the past it was used to divide. So shame on us if we allow that to continue. The good news is we don't have to allow that to continue. And, whether we're talking about the Reconnecting Communities program, that's $1 billion in dedicated funding for places where we saw evidence of this, where a road was used to divide one neighborhood from another, to take out a neighborhood. These dollars will go to restore, repair, or improve conditions there. But also just generally, as we're applying those road and bridge dollars, as we're improving and building out those roads and bridges that are so needed, we need to make sure that we have the right processes, that the communities are at the table, that voices are heard, that routes are selected that do the most good for the community, and that people who've been left out in the past get an opportunity. And that's not just in terms of having access to transportation. Of course, we got to make sure that good roads, good transit go to every kind of community in the country, but also the jobs that we're creating. I mean, the opportunities that are in front of us, that we're going to need, frankly, the entire American workforce ready to support. That's going to create a lot of opportunity, including for a lot of women and workers of color who, frankly, didn't see the benefits of work opportunities in past rounds of construction in the U.S.
Is there any concern that supply chain issues could slow down the infrastructure program?
It is a concern. It's something that we're watching closely because we're going to be summoning so much in terms of both the labor capacity and the raw materials that are needed to build all of these improvements and new pieces of infrastructure that we need. And this is one of the reasons why you're seeing a real push on the part of the president, really from day one, on Buy America. The best way to not have to worry about when a ship's going to bring a key part in from Asia is to make it right here in the United States. And because we are investing so much, we have a chance to develop whole industries in the U.S. There are fewer American companies, for example, in the business of making things like electric buses or train cars because America hadn't been buying very many of them. We can change that. We are changing that. And with that, we're going to create more domestic capacity that I think is part of the long-term answer to these supply chain concerns.
And how is the workflow going between your agency and Mitch Landrieu, former mayor of New Orleans, who President Biden put in charge of infrastructure?
So Mitch Landrieu has been a friend for a long time, ever since we were both mayors, and I'm really glad that the president has asked him to take on this coordinating role because this is not just a transportation bill. There are water and pollution remediation measures that are going through EPA. The Department of Commerce is taking the lead in terms of getting those broadband dollars out there. But all of us, of course, are working based on shared principles. And so he's playing a very important role coordinating our conversations, bringing us together at the White House, making sure that all of these many, many different programs are happening under the same umbrella. And it's been a really great resource for me and my department as we've been working to ensure that we're lined up with the White House and even just announcing these programs, let alone designing them, because there's so much in this bill. Just takes a ton of coordination.
Well, it must be a good problem to have as the head of an agency, to have a great deal of money and some planning and ideas behind it. So often people come into office and it's about cutting and slashing and reducing.
Absolutely. I mean, when I was mayor, I remember early on looking at our roads budget and asking, because we'd see, every 10 years or so, a road would be so damaged and degraded by being beaten up by traffic and the four seasons that we'd have to replace it. And I remember asking my public works director, how much funding do we have? How long would it take us with the funding we have to repave every road in the city? He said, well, it would take about 75 years, but our asphalt only lasted 10. Mayors and governors and states around the country have been having conversations like that. And so often the reason something didn't get done was there just wasn't the money. We're in a position to change that. Don't get me wrong, even $1 trillion could go out pretty quickly if we're not smart and careful about where to spend it. But for once, we're going to see what the biggest challenges are when it's not just about funding. And by the way, there are other challenges. Implementation is a challenge. Labor force, making sure we have enough workers trained to do the work is a challenge. Raw materials can be a challenge. It's not that when you have the funds, everything else is easy. It's that there are so many things that we couldn't even start on because we didn't have the funds, because our country spent 40 years not putting up the resources to enhance our infrastructure. The president changed that after so many presidents and Congresses have come and gone saying they were going to do it. We did it. We got the bill. But in many ways, that's just the end of the beginning.
My guest, Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. You can find him on Twitter at Secretary Pete. Deadly year. Last year was a deadly year on our nation's roads, and I understand you have a new road safety plan. I wonder if you could give us a sketch of that.
Yeah, we are losing far too many lives on our roadways. It's around 40,000 people a year. And the only reason that we tolerate it, I think, is that we're used to it. But we wouldn't tolerate it on any other mode of transportation. We would never tolerate 40,000 Americans being killed in airline crashes or on our subways or on ferries and boats. And yet we're kind of used to it when it comes to our roadways. And we don't have to be. Cities, countries around the world, but also cities right here in the United States have demonstrated the ability to dramatically reduce deaths on our roadways by embracing a strategy called Vision Zero. It sounds radical, but the basic idea is that we should not accept any roadway deaths, and we need to move toward that goal. There are proven strategies that have made a big difference, and we are putting together the resources to help with that. So we have our National Roadway Safety Strategy. We rolled it out a couple of weeks ago, partnering with states, partnering with local communities on the things that we know are going to make a difference: safer roads, safer drivers, safer vehicles, safer speeds, and a higher standard of post-crash care when something does happen to make sure people survive.
Finally, those truck driver protests in Ottawa look crazy, and they're talking about coming here just in time for State of the Union.
I don't understand everything about Canadian politics. I can barely get my head around the U.S. But let me say two things that are separate, but both come to mind when you raise this. First of all, this administration has a remarkable track record of saving lives through vaccinations and through public health measures and making sure we put the pandemic behind us. But let me say something else. When it comes to truck drivers, we need to acknowledge and celebrate the role that truck drivers play. If you got dressed today, if you ate anything today, are enjoying the device you're listening to this conversation on, you can thank a truck driver. And, they are a part of the definition of essential workers. And right now we have a shortage of truck drivers. And part of that is because so many have left the profession because it's so difficult or because they're not being compensated for their time. They're being compensated by the load or by the mile, which means sometimes their time gets wasted at warehouse gates or port gates for hours and hours, and they wind up eating the cost of that. We've got to have a national conversation about how to support truck drivers. In my view, that's totally separate and apart from some of the controversies about vaccines. It's just a basic fact in our economy. We count on truck drivers, and frankly, they deserve a better work life than we have given them as a country in so many places.
Pete Buttigieg is the 19th Secretary of Transportation. He tweets at Secretary Pete. Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.
I'm Julie Mason. This is SiriusXM.